Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. Hope clan versus clan is going well for you so far. Uh, in today's video though, I want to give you a more in-depth look into the PRISM shard system. Is it good? Is it bad? And sort of some of the things that are going on. In fact, let me get this up on screen so you can see. Here we go. So from content creator chat, for example, earlier on today, Farbstoff asked, is there a mercy system active for PRISM shards? Right, if you guys don't know, very quickly, your mercy system is over here. So for example, with ancient shards, after 200 summons without a legendary, you will get a stacking 5% bonus chance to pull a legendary per shard, which means that after 20 summons past 200, so at 220 summons, you have an extra 100% chance. You're guaranteed at that point to get a legendary if you have been somehow really unlucky and not gotten it up to that point. With PRISM shards, there is no mercy system. And this is very interesting, right? Plarium are saying that we are keeping an eye on the situation as this is our very first event of this kind. So we really hope that people will like it and we may introduce some improvements in the future. So I think that is interesting. So based off of community feedback, based off of participation, I suppose, in this event and what we think about it, they are willing to change it. And that is some of what I want to dive into today. Should they change it? Should there be a mercy system? Or should there not? I want to give you sort of my take on it because it's a bit of a complicated thing. The first thing I want to break down. Let's summon a shard first. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's summon. What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get? We're gonna get a rare. Okay, that's fine. Master Butcher. I mean, he's a pretty decent rare. I obviously have him already, but that's fine. Cool. We got a rare. What are your chances to get these different sorts of things? Let's dive into this. So I put this together. Just to show you guys and give you some ideas of how this compares right now to other shards without factoring in any sort of mercy system at all, right? I said, let's go in with 100 US dollars. I'm not saying you should spend this. This is just to give you an idea, and doubly so, I'm sort of incentivized to do this video as well because they have started literally in the last few minutes, maybe the last hour or so. I, for example, got this summon pool deal, right? 40 crystals for $10. Okay, cool. Well, let's go into this. $100, how much can we get out of it? Now, I'm going by sort of typical. This is typical enough pricing for what they're doing here. So an ancient shard is $1.20, a void shard $2.50. The prism shard is turning out to be, you need 20 to pull, and it's $5. You know, so 40 for $10, 20 for $5. That seems to be the current pricing. Sacreds for 20. So for $100, you could get 83 ancients, 40 voids, 20 prisms, or 5 sacreds. These are rough numbers. Like, you could obviously come in, I think, where is it? I've never actually bought this thing. Isn't that, there's like a $1 ancient shard you could buy, I think, every single day, one per day. So like, you know, this is obviously a rough thing, for example, but these are fairly standard average numbers and the average amount that you could get. So we come over to our 2x chances, okay, where you've got from an ancient and void, both the same chances, 83% for rare, 16% for epic, 1% for legendary. For prisms, 60% chance rare, 37 epic, 3% legendary. And this is also, you know, this is subject to change. The other ones won't change, but this is subject to change, I would say. For sacred, 0% rare, 88 epic, and 12 legendary. And here we go. So if we took $100, this is pulling, by the way, during 2x events. Obviously, there's no 2x for prisms, but there is for the other types. If we pull during 2x events, which let's say for most early game players, that's what you're going to do. How many stuff do we get out of it? How many champions? So for those 83 ancients, you get about 69 rares. You can see it's color coded. The darker the green, the better. 13 epics and 0.8 legendaries. For voids, you get 33 rares, 6.4 epics, 0.4 legendaries. So for example, we compare voids to ancients. Not really a surprise. They cost almost twice as much and they've got the same drop chance. You're getting, roughly speaking, about half of what you would get. However, on the flip side, from void shards, of course, they are void champions, which are much better, right? So that's sort of the flip there. For prism shards, how do prisms compare? So that would be 20 pulls to the prism shard. You would get 12 rares. So really, you're losing out compared to ancient shards, right? Where we're getting, you know, non-void champions here for this particular prism event. 12 rares, you're getting way less. 7.4 epics, again, you're getting way less, and 0.6 legendaries. Again, you're getting a good chunk less. You are getting a good chunk less. So in terms of just the raw numbers of rare, epic, and legendary champions that you're going to get, PRISM shards are much, much worse. Actually fairly comparable to sacred shards, actually, in terms of their value. Sacred shards being sort of notoriously overpriced. So at first glance, this seems pretty bad. Yeah, they're a bit better than sacred shards if you're going to buy sacred shards for $20. But man, we know that buying sacred shards for $20 is not really a good idea, even for people that like to spend on the game. So yeah, compared to ancients, it's not great. And there are no void champions in there. Incidentally, I didn't color code this, but you can see I did work it out. If they charge $4 for prisms, $3, $2.50, and $2. So for example, if we went to $2, you could see you'd be getting 18.5 epics and 1.5 legendaries. That's so much better. It's just never going to happen, right? Even $3 for it is kind of like, I'd say, sort of pushing the lowest limit of what they might go for, where you'd be getting one legendary. You're getting more than you would for ancients. Slightly less epics and obviously much less rares. I could see $3 prisms being a thing. I think $2 would be much too low. You can see with $4, it's still a good chunk below the ancients in 2x events, which is interesting. Of course, there is more to it than that, and we will break it down. If you want to compare to non-2x, and I think that's what's important as well, you might also call this 10x events, and we will flip over to SAF in a second and talk about that, because that's very important, right? Because you might be pulling your ancients, your voids, or your sacreds in 10x events with no 2x because you want the 10x champion. Interesting here, we just apply the new percentages, right? The worst percentages. And we come in for ancients. You can see our numbers, they go down a lot, right? 75.9 rares now, 6.6 epics and 0.4 legendaries. Again, this is not quite accurate on the epics because we're not incorporating mercy. So bear that in mind. It's just to give you a rough idea with no mercy incorporated. The prisms in this case actually compare fairly well. Yes, you're missing out on lots of rares, but you probably don't care too much about that. You're getting slightly more epics, and you are getting actually a good chunk more legendaries. So that's quite interesting. So as an alternative to 10x events, this becomes sort of intriguing. And I have to jump over to the video Saf did yesterday to break this down as well. So what he was looking at here, as of the current patch 7.3, there are 155 legendaries available to pull from your ancient or sacred shards. I actually don't know which one. I forget which one. It's slightly different, but not enough to really matter. But the point is, in a 10x event, that would give you about a 6.1% chance when you got a legendary for it to be the 10x legendary. 6.1. Now, interestingly enough, because this Prism Shard event, as it is right now, because there are 9 legendaries in it, this actually makes it much better. That if you get a legendary, you would have an 11.11% chance to get that, one of the specific champions. Let's say I wanted Trunda, there'd be an 11.11% chance I'd get Trunda if I hit legendary. So that becomes quite intriguing. It's actually fairly comparable to a 20x event from your regular shards. So that becomes quite intriguing. And I think you put this stuff together, and this presents as sort of the first step in this puzzle, I believe, right now, which is when you compare 10x events, Prism shards seem to be somewhat on par. Now, one of the big differences, in fact, the main big difference that I've been hinting at quite a bit here, is this mercy system. So building up this, I think this becomes very important because especially with how I typically advise, later game players to do this. For an early game player, you're typically just pulling in 2x events. You're not going to track this too much. You're going to be pulling in 2x events just to try to get as many epics as possible, trying to do fusions and that sort of it. When you get a bit further into the game and you've finally got like Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare, maybe Clan Boss on farm, doing some Doom Tower, you're getting more shards, you can save them up and you can exploit this mercy system a bit more. That's where things become more dynamic in terms of playing around this. So you might be like, ooh, well, I'll pull like 150 ancient shards in a 2x event, and if I get unlucky, I don't get anything, I'm just going to sit back and I'm going to wait for a double legendary event. That way, I know I can hit a legendary in very few shards because I've built up my mercy timer and I can get 2 legendaries. That has a really, really big impact, that mercy system. If you want to see, again, I've shared this before, but to show you the impact that this has, right? So in a non-2x event, you have a 0.5% chance, or 1 in 200, to get a legendary champion, right? 1 in 200. So in average, if there was no mercy system, it would take you, on average, 200 pulls to get a legendary, roughly speaking. Now, when you actually apply the mercy system, the average numbers of pulls goes down to 128.5. It has an absolutely massive impact. When we go into 2x events, 1% chance for a legendary. If there was no mercy system, 1 in 100, it would take you about 100 pulls on average to get a legendary. When we do apply the mercy system, it actually goes down to 87.3. So the mercy system actually really, over large numbers of shards, right? Over large numbers, like it doesn't, if you're at 0 on the mercy system and you're pulling 50 shards, like this stuff doesn't matter a damn. We're talking about, let's say you're going to play the game for 2 years and you're going to pull 1,000 ancient shards. This is where this becomes more accurate. Not fully accurate, but it will trend towards that point, okay? So that's what's going on here. Basically, the way it works is, I mean, to give you a quick example, let's say you pulled a bunch of ancients. Let's say the first one you got a legendary in 83 shards. The second time was 190. You got 1 in 20. You got 1 in 1. But without a mercy system, the next one took you 600 pulls to get a legendary. It could happen. You could be unlucky, like 260 maybe then the next time. 300, you get the next one in 160, 170, I don't know, something like that. That would be without a mercy system. What the mercy system basically does, and let's say it averaged out, I don't know what that averages out at, that will basically come in and say, well, nope, never mind. Remember, you're maxed out at 220, so that's 220. 260, nope, you would have got it at 220. 300, nope, 220, maximum. This is simplifying it, but hopefully will still give you an idea of how it pulls that average of 1 in 200 down so much. So the mercy system, just by itself, over the long course, will help you generate quite a few more legendaries, and also same thing with epics, quite a few more over the long term. And then this becomes sort of extra worrying, doesn't it? Because, again, if we go back to this 2x chances, these numbers I calculated here for ancient shards, which are much better than PRISM shards, this is not factoring in the mercy system. So if you were to go and factor in the mercy system, what you would basically do is instead of 100, you put in like 100,000 number of shards and then factor in the mercy system. A complicated calculation, and also who's going to spend $100,000 on shards is crazy. So I didn't do that for this. But if you did factor in the mercy system, these numbers get better, or at least the legendary and epic numbers would get better, but they wouldn't for PRISM shards. So that is something to consider as well. Should they add? Well, I guess that's the question then. Number one, how good do I think PRISM shards are based off of this? I guess a couple of questions. How do you get PRISM shards is the main question in terms of how good they are. You can buy them and you can also earn them in events. So number one, would I be buying PRISM shards with actual real money? Right now, I think the answer, broadly speaking, if I'm just going for number of legendaries, is certainly no way. Now, if I really, really cared about the 10x champions, like specific champions in this pool, like if I really wanted a few of these specific champions, it actually becomes, I think it's relatively comparable. It's not way better, it's not way worse, but comparing it to 10x events, it's actually fairly comparable, the amount of legendaries that you're getting. If we apply, again, our toolkit of a saying, okay, well, we factor in the mercy system, these numbers would go up. So these numbers would probably actually be slightly better than the PRISM system if we factored in 10x and playing around it. However, because then it's also a better chance than 10x events, I think it sort of balances out. So I think if you care about these particular legendaries, then, okay, I think, it's, in terms of a spender, I think it's actually somewhat similar. It's not the worst thing, actually. That being said, it's much more risky. You don't have any safety net of a mercy system. Mercy system is safety net. Bad luck protection is another word that's used for it. You could totally have bad luck. You could spend $100 here, easily pull everything and not get a legendary, and be no closer to getting a legendary, to be as far from a legendary as where you started. Whereas if I go in, I do that with ancient shards, I am 100% getting a legendary eventually. So that's a big difference. But if you're going to spend I think it's somewhat similar to spending for a 10x event. Somewhat similar to that. I think most people would say that sucks. And if that's how you feel, then that sucks. But I think it's fairly similar, really. Which is sort of expected as well, that the new shard system is not massively better nor massively worse than the existing shard systems. It's sort of the core of their game. And I think that it sort of fits alongside that. Now, in terms of how about doing this for free? Well, that's the thing. It's going to depend on the events and tournaments that are in there. We pulled the one from the Spider Turn Attack here. Now, because it's a turn attack tournament, this is obviously much more geared towards later game players. I was personally able to do it extremely easily, but I can clear Spider Hard 10, the current hardest version of Spider. I can clear it in 5 turns. So for me, it was really quick, really low effort. For a newer player, that's probably actually very tough, could be quite intensive. So it's going to depend, I suppose, on what the other events are going into this in terms of how accessible the Prism crystals are. I think the fact that it also uses all of your crystals automatically after the event ends and there's no mercy system, I think it would make more sense if there are lots of events where you can get Prism crystals and you do have to make that choice. Ooh, I invest into doing these events, and it might be kind of intensive, but I can get Prism crystals. If there's not many events, it's kind of pointless. If it's going well, let's say, I don't know, imagine like a different set of 9 legendaries. Let's say some of the legendaries you really want are in there, right? The gameplay is, oh, I go get more Prism crystals. If the only way to properly get more Prism crystals is just to buy it, there's not much gameplay there. And for the gameplay to actually be there, it means doing other events and stuff in the game. And if they're just freebie gimmies, or if there's not many of them, there's not really much gameplay. That has to be a bit, I think like a big Heroes Path event with some Prism crystals woven in there that you could choose to go and get. I think that could be kind of interesting. And you could say, oh, I actually really like these particular legendaries. It's a good chance to get a Brogni. I really want a Brogni. I'm going to go and I'm going to actually do this Heroes Path. I'll save up some stuff and do it. And yeah, I'll have a few goes for Brogni. I'm not going to take it too seriously, and we'll see how it goes. I think that's sort of an okay way to look at it. It's going to depend on the pricing. I think the fact that they gave out 20, which was a full pull of the shard, for that is reasonably okay. Again, to put that in perspective, if that has a $5 value, it's kind of like 2 void shards or about 4 ancient shards as the reward for this event, and for the difficulty of this event, I think having actual 4 ancient shards or 2 void shards up there makes it actually a pretty decent reward in terms of that. So that looks good. I think I have a fairly positive outlook on how they're pricing events right now, is my opinion. It seems fairly okay. So if that continues, and if there's more variety that are open to earlier game players, maybe some for later game players too, like this one, if there's a nice mix in there, and it's easy to get into and it's accessible, I think that's kind of a good win. In terms of this question of, should we add a mercy system? I'm a bit conflicted because there's 2 aspects to this. There's obviously what we looked at here. Mercy system equals better rates, right? It's better rates. It's bad luck protection. Mercy system equals bad luck protection, right? Those are both really good things, but they might also come at the cost of Plarium making these things more scarce, maybe making these summon rates, keeping these summon rates low. Whereas if they don't add in a mercy system, it could be cool. They could crank the rates up. They could make more of these crystals accessible so you can pull a bit more, because again, your mercy system is actually really behind the scenes upping your chances over a long time of getting legendaries. So they could make positive things. Would they? I don't know. I don't know, but that could be a negative. Mercy system equals more expensive Prism shards? Question mark, question mark. And then I think another one, I think probably the most important thing for me, Wait Shadow Legends. Have we heard about this before? I think we have. And this idea, and again, it comes back to shard summons. I've said this a lot, right? Which is sort of emphasized by not this, but by this, is that the mercy system is something that you can exploit, but in order to exploit it, you must have a large number of shards saved, which leads into Wait Shadow Legends. A lot of stuff in this game is about saving your resources. Save up your soul stones for soulstone tournaments. Save up your shards for crucial shard events and and fusions and stuff like that. Save your gems and energy for CVC. There's a lot of saving stuff in this game. There's something to be said for, I think, the event like this. One thing I like about the summon pool, I do have to say, is that, you know what? We're just going to pull all your crystals after the event ends. There's no mercy system. So it's like, go, any crystals you go and get, you're just going to have a chance to get this stuff. And it's quite simple. It's quite straightforward. There's no sort of metagame planning around, ooh, how do I exploit my mercy system like 2 months from now and saving up? It's just like, I get the crystals, I pull the crystals, that's it. It's sort of that simple. I think there's something to be said for that simplicity. I actually quite like that. And yeah, again, like, so long as there's nice events, like a nice heroes path or something, or multiple events where you can be like, oh yeah, cool, I actually do like this one. I like these summon pools. That's up right now. I'm going to go do some of these events and get some of these crystals, and I'll pull for them. Or if you don't like these champions, you go, cool, I don't care about these champs. I'm going to skip these prism crystals, not going to pull for it, whatever. Going to save my resources for something else. I think that actually works fairly well. So I like that it is not a Wait Shadow Legends system. Though it does sort of sound from this message that they might be introducing a mercy system in the future, which is sort of a bummer in a sense. There's definitely positives to it, but then there's also the negatives of, you know, it makes it more of a system that's probably more worthwhile engaging in. I kind of feel like there's enough systems like that in the game. Having something that's just, you know, it's not amazing, it's not terrible, go pull for it. It's sort of like a 10x event, and you don't need to buy the shards. You can just maybe get some for free in events, and that's kind of cool. Just go get it if you want to. That's kind of chill. I kind of like it. I guess it sort of depends how seriously you take everything and all of that. But let me know, what do you think? Prism crystals, what do you think? Would you buy them? Are you going for them in the free events? Do you just, generally speaking, like them or not? I think it's very early days yet. But yeah, I thought after this being out for, I guess, a day and a bit now, I've had a good bit of time to think about it. I said, my opinion on it is a bit more well-formed at this point. And I did want to provide you with, again, some insight into sort of the rough numbers in terms of this, especially with like shop packs coming in now and people definitely buying them and stuff like that. I do obviously think, by the way, let's end on that in terms of helping out people that might be buying stuff like this. I do think it's quite likely that in the future you could see like prism crystals for better prices coming in and stuff like that. That's sort of what they like to do, give you a whole bunch of packs that are really, really bad, and then they give you one that is relatively better, and you go, wow, it's an amazing pack, I must buy it because it's so much cheaper than usual, even though cheaper than usual is something that Plarium themselves develop. But at the same time, you've got these, you know, if you are a spender, you've got fairly well established over years now prices for stuff that you can use as a point of comparison. But there you go. Look, guys, thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Like I said, for me, actually vaguely positive about this, you know? I think it's actually kind of a nice system. I think people, also worth mentioning, I think people were a bit upset by the champions that are in here. I actually don't really agree with that. I actually think you've got a really nice selection of champions. And I think for a lot of players, it could actually have a really positive impact. Like there's some decent rares in here for early game accounts. Shadowbow Tierlack would be, I think, the best one, probably. I think, like I talked about this in my video, but there's lots of great epics. Mistrider Dahi's great. Creodan is great. Geomancer is basically a legendary. Hatatsu is amazing. Canelia. Like, there's really good epics in there. And then the legendaries are pretty much all fantastic progression. And even some of them are really good late game. Like, Trunda is going to be insane for Hydra Clash. Brogni is great. Kimi. Michinaki's amazing. Elva, you know, Galkabar and Ruark and Kyoku are not quite as good, but they're still good progression champ. I think, you know, for me, the champs are pretty solid. It'd be interesting to see Void champions in there in the future. I think there's no reason why that couldn't happen. There's like Void coloration, like that's a Void color right there. Just cycle through. I think it's pretty likely we'll see Voids. And certainly I'm curious to see what the rate of acquisition and if these these summoning chances stay the same throughout all of them. We'll see. Thanks for watching though. See you next time. I've said that about 5 times. Let's just leave. Goodbye.